Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for joining us today. Every year during WEB, University Development organizes a lecture series featuring prominent business leaders and professionals within the kingdom. Those individuals have been instrumental in shaping the business outlook within the kingdom and beyond. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Ghazi Binzagr, member of a Shura Council in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and a member of Beit Binzagr group of companies. Dr. Binzagr is the fourth generation member of the Binzagr family business, which started as a trading company in the Arabian Peninsula more than 130 years ago. He serves his family business in various capacities, including the Deputy Chairman of Rubaiyat Group and Deputy President of Abdullah and Saeed Muhammad Ubaid Binzagr Company. He is also a board member of Binzagr Unilever and Avon Beauty Arabia. His work within his group and as a volunteer in the community center on strategic human development and organization transformation. He established Wisal in 2007 to fulfill a lifelong passion towards embedding his homeland and the global community with the values of truth, beauty, and meaning. Dr. Binzagr's work has spanned a range of dynamic and enriching roles, including positions on the Shura Council and as a volunteer working with groundbreaking institutions such as Affat University and the governor of Al Madina think tank group that was set up to advise on regional development in Al Madina region. Dr. Binzagr holds a bachelor's degree in science from the University of California in Santa Barbara, a master's degree in international management from Thunderbird School of Global Management, and a PhD in management with minor in organizational development from New Mexico State University. We are delighted to have Dr. Binzagr with us today for his speech on the merchant teacher. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Ghazi Binzagr, his son Faisal, the project manager of Wisal, and the Miss Noha, the general manager of the company.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wa sayyid al-mursaleen. Hello everybody. Can you hear me well? I just want to make sure the sound is good. I'd like to start by telling you how honored I am to be here among you today. And I want to share with you a story. I tried to make it personal, but with a general theme that I hope would apply to each one that is here in the room. So as I speak today, I hope that I can trigger in you an exploration of who you are and your journey to fulfill the calling that you were created to be and become. I do so by centering the story on the struggles and the joys and the opportunities and the threats to try to discover who I am until I have become the person that is among you today. I will share with you glimpses from that life journey, which we have called the merchant teacher. And the theme that I really want you to ponder on is that I make the claim that within the soul of each one of us is a merchant teacher. I am not the only merchant teacher, and you don't have to come from a merchant family to be a merchant. And the point that I hope we will discover today together is how, when we discover that merchant inside of us and learn to be the teacher of it, that in fact we are on our path of discovering the unique individual that we are and to having the kind of impact that we hope to have on Earth or the globe or the universe, if that's your ambition. You will notice from the first slide that there's a contrast, and it's a contrast that was always within me and a contrast within each human being between a long discovery of who you authentically inside are and should be, and the packages that are bestowed on you at birth because of the family you came from, or the situation you find yourself in, or the country that you belong to. So in my case, my family, my country, wanted me to be a businessman, something I resisted for many years because in my younger years, I did not identify with that at all. Eventually, after a long journey, I have discovered that if I embrace the title, the merchant teacher, that in fact, I can embrace the business identity in me. What in you, today or in the past, has been a similar struggle between the expectations of others and where you want to become and be as a sense or an intuition that you feel from inside? I hope you begin to explore this as you hear my story. My story has roots in the identity of the land, which you can appreciate is heavily tied with Islamic identity. I come from a merchant family from the south of Arabia, and even prior to the emergence of Islam, the cities of Mecca and Medina were on the caravan routes that tied the south of Arabia with the north of Arabia and went beyond. They were part of the Silk Roads from China and the Frankenstein routes from Oman into the Persian Empire and into the Byzantine Empire or the Roman Empire. Sometimes we forget that there's a history to each one of us that goes far beyond our awareness, and yet it's very much about the very fabric and fiber about how you vibrate today. And it's that loss of awareness that sometimes limits our ability, particularly when we are caught in the day-to-day pragmatics requirements that we have to do for survival. I ask each of you to ponder what roots of empires and civilizations and heritage that may or may not be in your awareness, that in one way or the other may have influenced the kind of human being that you are today. Can you take track of that? Can you take stock of that in the beginning of the identification of why is it that you're here and what is it you want to become? You can see that not so long ago, we were a society of nomads, and my particular people were no different. And yet here we are today at the center of global dynamics in ways that we can comprehend or not comprehend. And I would make the claim that each one of us here in the room today has a similar story. You know it, you can explore it, perhaps one day you can even tell me about it. My Hadrami family, which comes from the southern part of Arabia, actually our particular tribe, which is the Sayari tribe, comes from the border between Hadramaut and Saudi Arabia in the Empty Quarter. We have always had an origin of being nomadic, somewhat ferocious, but honest and direct, and very brave warriors. Do you know what kind of a tribe you come from? And do you know how it has shaped you today? Again, I want you to ponder that question. The beauty of the tribes that we came from is that while they came from origins that are limited and removed from the world, took advantage of the very harshness of its surrounding and turned it into an advantage. There's something incredible in the human resilience that can take a disadvantage and turn it to an advantage. The Hadrami tribes are among the most traveled in the world, historically and today, and among the most integrated in the civilizations of the world. Here you're looking at some of the Hadramis who've made it to the neighborhoods of Indonesia. And by the way, there are members of the Binzagr family there today. And if you looked at their features, they would look more like the natives of that land. I've always made the claim that true tolerance is not in the acceptance of the other, but you being willing to intermarry with the other. That is the strongest kind of a bond that you can make with another civilization. I come from a house called Beit Binzagr, that's my family name. Immigrated to Jeddah about 4 generations ago. Actually, my son is the 5th generation. Now we have a member of the 6th generation. In the 19th century, looking for opportunity, like many other families. What is unique about Jeddah is because it is the entryway for the holy cities, it became a place where merchants from all over meet, and pilgrims come and sometimes don't want to leave. They intermixed with each other, intermarried with each other. So in my heritage is a tribal identity that comes from the purity of the Arabian Peninsula, mixed with many civilizations from around the world, ranging from the extreme west to the extreme east. From Morocco to Europe to China to India, all is mixed into the genetic coding of the person standing in front of you today. And I am sure if you took a genetic test yourself, you'll be surprised with how much of you is a blend and a mix of so many parts of the world, even though you may identify with one geographic area versus the other. The leader within each of us begins to emerge when we strike that balance between the apparent identity and the deeper, more universal identity that we slowly discover that links us with other people. So as I said, our roots go to the south of Arabia. These are some scenes from Hadramaut. And we moved from there into the Jeddah region. To the left, you have my great-grandfather, Muhammad Ubaid Binzagr. Actually, the first one that came to Jeddah was his father, Ubaid. Ubaid came and died at a young age, and the mother remarried from the Harbi tribe. Harbi tribe is known in Hijaz, and they expand from the regions around Medina and other areas. The stereotype is that Hadramis are very good at trade. My family was not good at trade. The Harbi member of the Harbi tribe from Medina is the one that taught my grandfather to trade. He had a small boat, and in those days, at the end of the 19th empire, you had colonies all around the Arabian Peninsula, and that's where prosperity was. And people used to take those little boats and go to Sudan and Egypt and India in an effort to bring goods from those countries and then trade them in the Arabian Peninsula. My grandfather, great-grandfather, Muhammad, was taught by his stepfather how to do that. I say that part of the story because in the subconscious of each of us are stereotypes about what is and isn't. Hadramis are good for trade. Harbis are ferocious warriors that used to cut the roots of trade coming to Mecca and Medina. And the reality of how the world is rarely fits the stereotypes that we've created over time. Can we recognize the baggage of stereotypes that we have and hold in our own stories and begin to understand, just like we are upset when we are judged by others in superficial manners, that we too cannot judge others in such manners. Having learned the trade, he established a house of trade in Jeddah. So when we say Beit Binzagr, and you saw the previous card, most of the families of Jeddah, Mecca, Medina were known by the families that they belonged to, and the houses were known accordingly. And they were either houses of trade or houses of various professions. So some of the names you hear common in the area, like Joharji, which means the person that works with jewelry and others. There are family names that we have to this day that reflect the different kind of professions that people had. In these pictures, which were drawn, by the way, by my aunt, who is a famous artist, her name is Binzagr, you see 3 generations ending with the generation before me. On the top is Muhammad Ubaid. The second generation, which I witnessed, is of my grandfather on the right, Saeed, and his older brother, and then my father and uncles. My father is the one with the glasses. I represent the 4th generation, and Faisal here in the room represents the 5th generation. Our family, having picked up the tradition from Al-Harbi, stepfather, began to strengthen the relationships that they had with the manufacturers of the goods that they were bringing in from Sudan and Egypt. One of the first organizations that we established a long-term relationship with is the multinational company Unilever. We have a relationship with them that extends more than 70 years right now. When our relationship of trade began with Unilever, they did not used to be official documents to bound the trust that was between us. It was in the beginning based on a word, and the word meant gold in the way we traded in those days. To this day, while we deal with modern multinational organizations, similar to the story of Saudi Arabia, there's a delicate balance unique to a few countries in the world, and Saudi is among them, between the formal and the informal, between hierarchical structures that we recognize like companies and organizations, and informal relationships of trust that create bonds of understanding that bring stability to the region and the world. We, myself, my family, and many other families in this region are part of that legacy, including my own royal family in this country. When that part and component is not understood in the legacy of each of us, we're depriving ourselves of understanding the full strength of what we may bring to the table when we're discovering the unique merchant teacher in each one of us. We must recognize the long-term relations that have shaped us to be who we are today and honor them in one way or another. We may not always see eye to eye. At times we may even anger each other. We may even sever formal relationships with each other at certain times. But can we remember that underneath it all is an eternal bond that continues? And can we identify it and nourish it? And my claim to you today is you cannot take leadership of that unless you take leadership of the awareness within you of where does it rest within your own soul. A more recent picture with a more recent alliance with Avon. I'm sure you're familiar with Avon, the company that makes home makeup and others. Proudly, my aunt, who was not educated, led the establishment of this organization because it has a proud heritage of empowering women from home. And it was extremely suitable for the environment in Saudi Arabia 50 years ago, in that you were able, in a conservative society, to take an average lady who still chooses to be a mother at home and begin to teach her to become a businesswoman. A powerful lesson that I learned is that if you want to be a change agent, work in harmony with the universe. Don't take the waves head on. You will only foolishly break yourself against a wave that will continue to go as per the forces of the universe. But how are we to understand that if we lose touch of those very forces to begin with? So it's not just the force of history and the force of your family, but the physical and the spiritual forces that make reality the way it is today, by whatever religious or non-religious conviction that you may be holding. I am not trying to impose my framework on whatever your views are, but I do make the claim that we live in a wider universe, and it's important to understand it as we take leadership. So today we have a portfolio of various companies we accumulated through the years. It moved from us being at a disadvantage, coming poor from another region of the peninsula, taken care by a stepfather who took care of a mother of an individual who just had the will and the perseverance to continue, seeking goods that are of usefulness and value to a community that didn't have it, recognizing the meaning of a relationship and tying it into long-term alliances that over time gave us the advantage, eventually into joint ventures, and many of the goods that one day we imported from the world are manufactured in Saudi Arabia today, led by purely Saudi teams who are managing it from the top to the bottom. I'll now move with focus into me personally, against that context. As I do so, I ask you kindly to ponder your own selves, your own lives, your own stories, your own journeys, from the wider context to the inner you. Who am I? Who are you? And how do you define that? And how do you take leadership with that so that you can make something that at the moment of your death you feel proud of the legacy that you've left behind and comfortable with the place you're going to head to next? These are pictures of my father, some of my uncles, when they were very young, on a journey that they were taken to by their great uncle at the time to begin to discover the world. What a beautiful mix between being proud and attuned and centered on your identity and fully in touch with the global picture. This is me in my youth. I was often taken care of by my eldest aunt. She's the one that started Avon. She has since passed away. Beautiful in the old heritage of the Arabian Peninsula is the idea of the extended family. So in addition to being brought by my mother and my father, there were numerous aunts and uncles and grandparents and people in the house I didn't know who they were. And they all had a say in what I should do and I shouldn't do. And while when I was young it frustrated me, it taught me when I grew up the importance of the existence of multiple models in the life of an individual to acquire flexibility. You see, nobody is perfect. So if my mother had failings or my father had failings, they'll pass on to me. And if the only model I knew bringing me up was my father and my mother, for better or worse, I would have acquired good strengths from them and also weaknesses from them. And I wouldn't have known better. One of the claims I make is that in having multiple models that contribute and partake into the shaping of who we are from a young age, it builds in us and nourishes in us a flexibility to deal with a whole host of differences in people, in situations. There were many, many times when my parents would leave me with my auntie to take care of me, and they would go on journeys. And I loved her so much, you can see from the picture. If I didn't tell you, you'd think she was my mother. I love my mother dearly, but I made the point of putting that picture in emphasizing the beauty and complexity of relations that go beyond the core family. This is me in school. This is me on the left. And on the right, I'm proudly showing a product that we actually today make called Suntop. You may see it in the Bigalas. I actually grew up with it. It's now a bestseller in Saudi Arabia, but what people may or may not know is the number of days where my father would bring a product under trial and my sister would try it or I would try it. And we, not a scientific marketing research, was the basis of some successes that you see in the market today. Do we have the courage to experiment? Do we have the courage to honor what is formal, but know that there are times to transcend what is formal to what is not? and to know that by necessity, at times we will be controversial in what we do and act, but somehow have a system of honor that will keep us intact and see us through it all. As I show you the pictures, I am deliberately injecting thoughts and ideas that I hope you ponder and think about, that I believe are central in the idea of the merchant teacher in each one of us. When I was young, I was passionate about aviation. I thought I would be a pilot one day. Imagine you grow up in a family of businessmen and women, and they are adamant that that's what we do and that's what our tribes have done, and look at the world we have conquered by having Hadramis everywhere doing well in business. And here you are running in the garden looking at every plane that flies in the sky. But that's who I was and that's who I wanted. And I'm highlighting here an interesting situation in which usually the cards dealt to us don't always give us exactly what we think we want to be the people that we want to become at different stages in life. How do we manage that dilemma between what is given to us and between what is within us, not denying either, and striking a balance that eventually shapes the resilience that makes us who we are? Something to ponder. In addition, there was a little astronomer in me. I wanted to explore space. I chose this picture in particular because there were numerous journeys. We have a strong link between Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom because of the trade that we have. Generations of us were educated there. While I was educated in the US, my son is educated in the UK again. My father was educated there, and it goes back to my grandfather's age with the beginning of the link with certain countries. Every time I used to take the aircraft, I would look as we crossed the Red Sea and see the Nile. And from my youth, when I visited the pyramids, I was mesmerized by the ability of humanity from an early age to build structures that today we still do not understand. In me was a scientist. In me was a flyer that wanted to fly. In me was not a businessman that wanted to deal in business. That's what I hope to do one day. And to this day, I still have these yearnings. How does the merchant teacher bring it all together so that he can meet the responsibilities expected of him and still somehow not kill the very spirit that makes me uniquely me? Here you see when I went to the language school on the left, I was so proud of being a Saudi Arabian. And on days when they were celebrating national days from around the world, I wanted to stand there with my thobe and carry the flag. I cannot tell you in words what that flag meant to me and still means to me today. You may or may not identify with a flag. You may or may not identify with a book. I identify with a scriptural book called the Quran. You may choose to identify with whatever you do, but you do have to recognize these symbolic things that you hold dear that carry a degree of sacredness and shape the human being that you are today. How can you understand, and I understand, that the shaping of who you are to become the leader you want to become is in every step and every moment and every act that you strike that balance between your identity appropriately in the situations that the universe puts at you. On the right is my graduation when I got my bachelor's degree. I defied my family. I fought with my family, and they agreed to let me study physics instead of studying business. But they made a deal with me. Merchants are all about deal. So fine, sit here, son. You want to study physics. Physics is a degree. Being a merchant is about a set of skills so that you can earn a living. Can we make a deal that we pay for you to study whatever you want? And when you had enough, we will send you to the business school that we think is good for you? I thought, why not? So I studied physics. I was interested in cosmology. When I finished my physics degree, at the time, I did not feel at the University of California they were going to create an Einstein out of me, even though at that campus they had the Institute of Theoretical Physics and there were Nobel Prize professors that were teaching me. When they were teaching me, they were more interested in the research they were doing. So as an undergraduate number, and that's what I was, one of many thousands, I did not feel I got the education that I wanted to get. At that time, I was satisfied to leave and do whatever my family wanted with me. But the learning I wish to share with you today is that there is a presence that we bring when we fulfill our destiny. When we don't do that, we're not just betraying our own journey, we're betraying the people that were assigned by whatever you want to call it. I call it Allah, you call it the universe, that are meant to engage us so that they are going to be shaped by me as much as I will be shaped by them. How many professors who are not interested in teaching that may or may have not resulted in the derailing of a course that I could have taken? I have made a commitment to myself then to discover the meaning of being a teacher and slowly to make the claim that each of us actually should become a teacher of whatever it is that they believe in, that they live for, that they make. And that if they don't have that passion, it should be a sign, a flag post, that something is wrong in the journey that they're taking. And I invite you to consider where you may or may not be making what I consider to be such a mistake. They picked Thunderbird for me as a business school, and it was great. Am I running out of time? What time is it? Okay, excellent. I have 15 minutes. They chose Thunderbird for me. I actually did not like my degree, but I loved Thunderbird. There were a lot of people coming from all over the world, and the relationships I formed were important, and it made me realize the importance of relationships in co-creating destiny. And to this day, I believe, and you'll see later in the company that I've created, it's called Wisal, and Wisal is all about connections. But what I most loved about Thunderbird is that it was in Arizona, in the southwest of the United States, and I discovered a magic that I cannot describe in words. I have fallen in love with the desert, not in Saudi Arabia, because I grew up in an urban city here. I've fallen in love in the desert when I was in Arizona. I fell in love with Arizona. You don't have to fall in love with Arizona. But where might you be falling in love that you're not paying attention to, that goes beyond the relationship or the spouse? That may be a land, that may be a star out in the heavens, that can and should shape your destiny. To this day, the magic I felt in Arizona is a part of the inner human being that I am. I can smell it, the scent of it to this day. And when I'm confused in my life journey, I recall that scent and get my bearings straight again after the goals that I believe I was created to fulfill. Can you recognize such a scent in your life? And where does it exist? And where should you anchor it? And are you making the time to stop and pause, to smell it, so that you can redirect yourself back again to the course of leadership that you are meant to take? Obviously, these are the dunes of Arabia, and you can see not even a bush of anything growing in it. But it too has its magic. My origins coming from the empty quarter, I can now recognize it. When I visited the Rub' al-Khali, the empty quarter, for the first time, it was like coming home. We don't know what thousands of years of generations in our genetic coding is asking us to do. But we must learn to hear such voices, because within them there is a part of the story of the journey that we take. You tell me about yours. That's me running in the empty quarter. That's an honest picture. That is me. Finally had the chance in an event that took place to bring people from outside of the country. And the first time I saw it, I just wanted to run. I took over my headgear and I just started running. When I first came back from my studies, and by the way, I got a PhD in organizational development. And I did so because during my years at Thunderbird, I didn't like any course except for an elective course I took in OB, organizational behavior. It's more like a blend of psychology and sociology. I found myself there. There's a verse in the Quran that says, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. We will show them our signs in all horizons and in themselves until they see it as a truth. All my years, till I started my PhD, I'm looking for that truth in all horizons. And I thought I'd be a cosmologist. I only entered the business school because my family sent me there. I didn't like it. But destiny was co-writing destiny with me when it said, you will have a course there that you will like on human behavior. And with such a verse, I was able to make peace that I'm still looking for the mystery. I'm still looking for the secrets. There's still a philosopher in me. But now, switching from far horizons to the inner human secrets of the human being. The beauty that gave me is that I now belong to a profession that can make me a scientist, can make me a philosopher, but has profound practical applications that I can apply in the world of business and indeed slowly into the development of my own home country. It's in such secrets that we find the harmony that allow us to blend what we thought we are with what our surrounding is telling us we ought to be, honoring and recognizing the blend, and finally, perhaps striking into a third path that balances it all. Where will such a balance rest for you if you haven't discovered it already? Or if you have, how did you arrive to it? From the early days when I finished my PhD, I recognized that what my family was asking me to do and the soul within me still had a gap. I was influenced during my studies by the writings of Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's the one book to this day that I have all its principles in my head. I actually can apply it directly at each situation at a time. This is the degree to which I internalize that book. The important thing here is a glimpse of how I'm trying to bridge a gap between the world of business, which looks... Sorry. I'm not good with technology, as you can see. Yeah, if we go forward from here. Going forward? No, you're going back now. Yeah, forward. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, right there. You see, the world of business often looks like what you see. People who are disempowered, out to survive by whatever job that they want. And I am not proud to say, in some of our organizations, the picture wasn't very different. We had organizations that were very different than that. I would go with my cousins and visit state-of-the-art plants made by Unilever and see a gap. And so what I decided is the social scientist in me will try to bridge that gap. And that has since become the role I play within the group and outside of the group. How do you take theories that can inform human behavior and apply it to the development of organizations and the community at large. That's my profession. Notice I started with aviation, moved into astronomy. My family wanted me to be a businessman, and what I settled on was neither what they wanted or what I wanted, but in the end, a useful profession that can meet their needs and my need. And often I believe that a successful leader has that ability to strike the balance between all of the various needs of all of the various stakeholders. I started to view our organizations like villages, not like companies, because that's how I was trained. I was trained as an anthropologist, sociologist, and a psychologist, and began to make interventions that would say, how would I change the dynamics of how that village would flow? And stop to pretend that I'm a businessman that can manage the numbers. Let either the professionals do that or other family members that are strong at it to do that. So a key learning for me is that the universe does not make anyone perfect. All of us are plugged somewhere in it, and we need others to complement us, to complete us. And part of our journey is not just self-discovery so that we know ourselves. So by contrast, we know who do we need to complement us to complete the work that we are meant to do. I focused on the social development of the organizations that I was responsible for, and I let others focus on other aspects. The argument I battled very hard to make is that it's not just a happy, healthy individual that is going to work well. It has to be a healthy, happy individual that belongs to a happy and healthy community or village. We are both individual creatures and communal creatures, and healthy human systems always balances both. Various attempts and interventions that I made to change the operating culture of the organizations. I also recognized that I had the ability to write, so I started to write in particular publications, and what that did is it gave exposure to my thinking to others. And from such an exposure, people began to communicate with me and ask me to do other interventions for them. And the learning there, once you discover the flower that you are, it's time to open up. Otherwise, how will the bees find you? And how will they make honey? We speak of honey because Hadramis, by the way, are known for the best honey in the world. It's called Sidr honey. If you didn't find it or taste it, go taste it and tell me whether you've ever tasted a honey so good. The flower in you opens when it's ready to share with the world. When it does, it is sending a message to the surrounding that you're ready to engage. You have now become a merchant. I began to accept volunteer assignments. This is me. Today I'm an honorary member of the board at Ifat University, the first private women college in Saudi Arabia. I volunteered there for more than 10 years. A lot of who I am today was shaped by women leadership who taught me to think in ways I didn't think imaginable for me. What I love about this university is that delicate balance it's trying to strike between honoring the identity of what we are as Saudis, as Arabs and Muslims, and opening up to best practices in the world so that we can become a people proud of what we produce. Volunteer work is a powerful way of expanding without severing commitments that you have today. And I learned it from a book that I really love called The Work We Were Born to Do. Incredible. You don't always have to walk away from all your responsibilities until the time is right to walk from your responsibilities. Until then, how do you balance it? How do you honor all your obligations? And when it's time to walk, what help you may need into forging a new path that people may or may not understand. Finally, at some point, I decided, and it was the advice of a mentor of mine from Australia who taught me community development. He observed me in Saudi Arabia and he said, until you create your own organization, I don't think you'll be able to achieve what you want to achieve. So at some point, I decided I will create a company that will extend the philosophy and the thinking that I have within our group into the community, and I hope one day into the world at large. The name Wisal in Arabic, for those who do not speak Arabic, means intimate connection. Actually, the word Wisal usually is used for romantic connections. When we speak of Wisal, we speak like of a Wisal between a man and a woman. This is the degree of intimacy. I love the fact that we today operate a professional organization that holds that name. Because the key and the secret that I discovered in years of operating is in the intimacy of connections that change and transformation happens. First within, and then with your surrounding. You first must connect with your subconscious to figure out what wisdom it has that you don't know about. You must connect between your heart and your mind to be able to create a balance between logic and feelings and hunches. You must learn to create a connection between the body standing for the material, the concrete, and the spirit standing for meaning and purpose and things that self-transcend. Wisal is an organization that embodies and brings together the thinking of a journey that I have taken so that it manifests itself as a way that brings all of who I am together. I feel in the journey of every leader, every hero, comes the point where the pieces come together. And each of us will recognize when that point comes. It doesn't have to come in the form of a company, but it comes in the form of something. The way you know it is when you don't feel fragmented anymore. You feel it came together, and it's a beautiful feeling. Through Wisal, we engage in a lot of community relations. Some of what we do, and I must admit we're not yet quite successful at it, is very pragmatic. But even my own team sitting here is struggling with me, trying to bring me down to earth in the expressions and the language so that it's not too flowery and too philosophic. How now, in that kind of a dialogue, I become more than just a merchant, but a teacher. The reason I claim there's a teacher in each of us, because when you get to that place where it comes together, there's a conviction that you now suddenly feel compelled to share with the world. It may be centered on a product. It may be centered on an idea. It may be centered on a service. Whatever it is centered on, what we ordinarily call salesmanship is actually teacherhood in its finest form. I wish teachers would learn the art of selling. Perhaps they would become better teachers. From Wisal also, I was able to make alliances with the world, other organizations around the world that are aligned with developmental thinking that would be good for organizations in Saudi Arabia. That's my journey. Your journey may be different. What I'm trying to illustrate is how you start inward and you begin to extend to the outside. And finally, and I'm very proud, I'm honored that my king has chosen me to be a member of the Shura Council, where I see absolutely no discontinuity from the work I do there and the work I do within my family business and the work I do for the community, calling for a deeper understanding of humanity and the social sciences in bringing about better human systems. With Shura, I also partook in many international events. It's the same work, the same journey in everything that I do. This is the head of Majlis Shura in the center, and I'm to his right. This is from a trip to Vietnam. An incredible experience. I've never been there. I never would have been there had it not been for Majlis Shura. This is me in Indonesia, and a member of parliament is from a Sagaf family, a Hadramati heritage, and here I am meeting her at the other side of the world and recognizing that each of us have circles that somehow are going to meet. And when we do, we have connections, and somehow it helps facilitate the work we were born to do. So the merchant teacher finally comes to be. He's centered on the idea that the universe is full of commodities. And a good merchant converts it from a commodity to a value add of something, of sorts. And I claim that all of us human beings exist for a value add. The secret is, can we convert our life journey from simply being a commodity, taken for granted, not recognized, not seen as being any different from the next seed sitting next to it, to somehow working at it with human ingenuity, creativity, and taking that seed and turning it into a product, a shampoo that you use, a bar of soap, a food that you eat. You are no different. And once you recognize that you are that grain that can become a value add, I'll show you incredible authors, the value merchants. In this book, he's speaking all about merchants becoming value-add merchants as opposed to commodity. But what I learned from this book is, what if the commodity is me? What would I do? The teacher bit, as I said, you will discover when you feel you've gained clarity of what it is you're meant to do. Stephen Covey often says the best way to learn something is by teaching it. And I've taken that learning to heart. So I often accept assignments and responsibilities where I have to speak, the way I address you today. And I take seriously my calling as a teacher, in the sense that there are messages I learned from my life journey that I wish to pass to others. Numerous conferences, numerous ideas. It doesn't matter what their names are. But often we're invited, don't shy away from them once you discover the calling within you. You can speak, you connect, you go with delegates, you learn to make the difference. Eventually you get to a place where you're trusted by decision makers. Lo and behold, you're still the merchant teacher for something that they need to know, and you happen to have that particular grain of wisdom, and you can pass it on to them. They may be within the kingdom, they may be delegates from outside the kingdom, they may be ambassadors, it doesn't matter what they are. So let me conclude with the merchant teacher within you. All throughout my presentation, I showed you my life journey, and I asked you to ponder yours. I showed you that one particular book influenced me more than other books, but I brought today a sample of 2 other books that I have. What are the books that are shaping you today? What are the programs that you're watching that are making you? Who are the women and men of wisdom that are making you discover what you are and what you are meant to be, and what goodness you are meant to bring to this universe? Every human, according to Stephen Covey, has 4 endowments: self-awareness, consciousness, imagination, and free will. These give us the ultimate human freedom, the power to choose to respond to change. My life journey certainly has taught me the importance of these 4 endowments that make us special and unique in the universe. I believe that the more we discover them, the better able we are to be that merchant teacher that we are all meant to be. Stephen Covey also speaks of 4 roles of leadership, because at some point you change course in your life from being the receiver to being the leader. And when you do so, you recognize that it's not just organizations that must do these things, but that the first and the most precious and the most important leadership that the merchant teacher recognizes is the leadership of self. And in so doing, you ask, what pathfinding must I take in my journey? What aligning will it require between me and others that may or may not be ready to accept me for who I am, provided you have the integrity within, because there are times when, believe me, you will be making controversial decisions and people will be questioning the very fabric that makes you and the very core of who you are. You must, at that stage, have gained enough clarity to be able at least to make peace with yourself as you move forward on that journey that you believe you were meant to take. All leaders, I claim, do that. All merchant teachers do that. But aligning by its very definition means that it's not a selfish exercise. It's an exercise where I take what matters to me and what matters to you and bring alignment to it. And I also recognize that leadership is always and most importantly about modeling. If I am not a true model of what I believe, how will anyone accept me as a merchant? How will anyone accept me as a teacher? It's within that that you finally realize that by empowering others to extend your message, that you can co-create a symphony that brings beauty to the universe. In so doing, you unleash the four circles within you. Your mind will emphasize your talent, your heart will bring your passion, and your body will be the engine and the resource that drives it all. But your spirit will be your reminding conscious of what it is that you believe sets you apart and why you must do what you must do. The journey will have days that will feel like a rainbow. The colors come together. Vistas look beautiful. Remember me and what I said on those days, because not all of those days will be that. And don't be disoriented when the rainbow grows. You still are part of the universe. You still have peaks to climb, and some days your peak may be a lonely peak. Go for it, because you know you're meant to take that journey. Don't be frightened of the darkness of the deep oceans that you have to take, trying to understand who you are, what you're meant to do, and taking journeys on your own that may bring confusion to you even. You must take those days too. It is also part of the merchant teacher. It is part of leadership. Remember, our universe started with a big bang. Some say, Quran definitely says, it will return to how it started. In that incredible journey which we are part of, what is your instrument? What musical does it want to play? And how will it complete the symphony? So that the symphony of the universe plays the beauty of every tune that it was meant to play. This has been my story. It is your story. And a story of me honoring the identity of Beit Binzagr, the house of Binzagr, from whom I come and belong, and an organization called Wisal that represents the thinking that I now bring. I'm proudly a fifth generation, and the general manager of the company are with me here today. The big hand doesn't go to me, but to them that have helped me put this presentation together for you. Thank you.